Why did Rome fall? It's one of those huge questions in history, right? A story of unbelievable power and then collapse. But that simple story we all learned, barbarians at the gates and it's all over, yeah, that's not the whole picture. Not even close. Today, we're digging into the real story. And George Conway really hits the nail on the head here. The fall of Rome isn't just some dusty old history lesson. It's a story we keep coming back to like a cautionary tale. We're trying to figure out how something so massive, so powerful, could just unravel. We all have this image in our heads, don't we? A single dramatic event, the city burning, the empire ending overnight. But what if the fall wasn't really a fall at all? What if it was a slow, incredibly complex transformation? Well, we're about to peel back the layers of myth to get to what really happened. So let's start with the basics. First, we've got to ask what the fall of Rome even means, because that phrase itself can be pretty misleading. Okay, so here's the most important thing to get your head around. There was no single day the Roman Empire just ended. It didn't happen. What we're really talking about is a long, drawn-out process, a slow unraveling that took about a century, where the central government in the West just lost its grip. And this timeline really paints the picture. In 395, the empire officially splits in two. Just 15 years later, in 410, Rome itself is sacked. Can you imagine the shock? It was a massive psychological blow. And that famous date with all learn, 476, that wasn't the big climax. It was more like the final whimper, when the last emperor in the West was quietly kicked off the throne. It was a long series of heavy blows, not one knockout punch. But here's the plot twist, the part of the story that often gets ignored. While the West was falling apart, the eastern half, what we now call the Byzantine Empire, wasn't just surviving, it was thriving. And it kept going for another 1,000 years, preserving Roman laws and culture. So this isn't just a story about collapse, it's also a story about continuation. Okay, so if it wasn't one single event, what did cause the decline? Well, it turns out it was a perfect storm of crises all hitting at once. So forget trying to find one simple answer. Historians today pretty much agree that the Western Empire was just overwhelmed by a ton of different problems, all converging, all feeding off of each other. From the outside, the pressure was absolutely relentless. You had the powerful Sasanian Empire in the east, a constant military drain. At the same time, the Huns were pushing massive groups like the Goths right across the Roman frontiers. The Roman army, stretched way too thin, just couldn't cope with the sheer numbers. And at the very same time, the empire was basically rotting from the inside. You had a whole series of weak emperors, which led to endless, bloody civil wars for power. Corruption was out of control, siphoning off money needed for defense. And get this, the richest of the rich often just refused to pay taxes for the army or let their workers be recruited. The system was breaking down right from the top. And that political decay bled right into the economy. To pay for the massive military and government, taxes on regular people became completely unbearable. The gap between the super rich and the poor grew into a giant chasm. Cities, the very heart of Roman life, started to crumble as they ran out of money to provide even basic services. And as if all that wasn't enough, we now know Rome was getting hammered by environmental disasters. The good, stable climate that had helped it grow for centuries, it ended. Things got colder, harvests failed, and then came the pandemics, devastating plagues that killed millions. Ironically, the amazing Roman road system that held the empire together also became a superhighway for spreading disease. With so many complicated causes, you can see why it's tempting to look for a single, simple culprit. So, let's tackle one of the most famous theories out there and see what the actual science says. I'm sure you've heard this one. The Roman elite, with their lead pipes and lead-sweetened wine, slowly poisoned themselves into extinction. It's a really compelling idea, but is it true? One of the main suspects in this theory is a sweetener called sapa. Since sugar was super rare, Romans would boil grape juice down in lead pots to create this sweet syrup. They put it in everything, food, wine, you name it. For the elite, this would have been a major source of lead poisoning. But when scientists actually analyzed ancient Roman skeletons, they found something completely unexpected. The lead levels in the average Roman were actually less than half of what we see in modern Europeans. And that leads us to this pretty definitive conclusion from a major study. While some Romans definitely had lead exposure, it wasn't a widespread public health crisis big enough to bring down an entire empire. The science just doesn't support the myth. So we've seen that the fall of Rome was this incredibly complex unraveling, not some simple collapse. But why does this ancient story still resonate so powerfully today? Why do we still care? Well, a lot of people look at Rome's internal struggles, the political division, the massive inequality, the decay of its institutions, and they see some pretty eerie parallels to our world today. It's a powerful reminder that even the mightiest systems can be incredibly fragile. And this gets right to the heart of it. The Roman Republic was built on the ideal of SPQR, the Senate and the people of Rome. It was about loyalty to the system itself. That system started to crumble when people's loyalty shifted away from those principles and toward powerful individuals instead. And that's a challenge that modern democracies know all too well. But Rome's legacy isn't just a bunch of political warnings. It's also about sheer scale and ingenuity that can still just blow your mind. Take the Circus Maximus, their chariot racing stadium. It could hold over 250,000 people. Let that sink in. That is bigger than any sports stadium we have on Earth today. And the connections can be surprisingly personal and kind of fun. Think graffiti is modern? The Romans were masters of it. The doggy bag you take home from a restaurant, they basically invented it. Even fast food isn't new. An ancient celebrity chef wrote down a recipe that looks suspiciously like a hamburger patty. Our daily lives are just filled with these little echoes of Rome. So Rome's story isn't about a sudden fall, but a complex transformation with lessons about politics, society, and, well, human nature. It's a story that never really ended, which leaves us with a final question. As its echoes reverberate through our own time, what should we be listening for?